out to West 2's Amanda Ober, who is joined by our legal analyst. Amanda, a lot to dissect today.
Yes, absolutely. And before we went to the commercial break, we heard that forensic expert, the botanist that the defense called this morning, a Dr. Jane Bach. And let me start off with Jeff Dean. How little did that help the defense? It really seemed like Jeff Ashton basically negated her testimony.
So you want to go, Bach. But no, you can't do that.
Okay.
She was, you know, it was almost okay. It was almost okay until the very end. He asked his last question. He's walking away, and then she goes, or dog. And then he almost started laughing.
He did.
He was very kind to her. It is the province of a skilled lawyer to know when you can be a certain way, when you can be aggressive, or when you can be politely aggressive. He was very charming with her. She was a very nice lady, clearly there to help. Her demeanor would not have tolerated that berating that he has done with other people. He kept his distance from her. He was overly expressive with her and asking questions. He wanted to make sure she got her words in. But he wanted her to get her words in because the things she was saying weren't going to be able to be backed up by anything else that's been there. This is the way it is when the points you're trying to make aren't going to be supported by the weight of the evidence. None of the DNA experts, none of the experts about the body or the growth of the plants, it's going to fall. It's going to fall because it's destined to fall. And then when you compound the fact that these witnesses are not prepared for their cross-examinations, then you're going to get a disaster like this every time.
Well, is that what we're seeing? Because it struck me on Saturday with Dr. Spitz and then today with Dr. Bach that these witnesses seem to sort of get to the point where Ashton is able to confuse them a little, or they get confused themselves. Is that because they just haven't been prepared?
Yes. Here's why they're confused. Jose Baez has only provided them with the positive facts that help his case, okay? He has not provided them with all the negative evidence against his client. And so that's why they're coming in there and they're completely kind of caught off guard with this negative evidence where I think if they were to look at it objectively and not hired by a defense attorney, they might go, yeah, that does support what the state's experts say. Or they might say, I really can't reach the conclusion that the defense wants me to reach because when you take that into account, it's just not plausible. And here's the bottom line. Casey Anthony had a credibility problem once we listened to all the videos of her lying. Jose Baez has now developed a major credibility problem in front of everybody in that courtroom, and now every single expert that testifies has a credibility problem that Jeff Ashton is just violently exposing to the world. Jeff Ashton has assassinated every single one of their experts. They haven't proven a single point that advances Jose Baez's defense. And at the end of the day, I really think you should pull out the white pocket swear and start waving it because that's how bad this defense has gotten. They just need to surrender because at this point, I think they'd have been better off not even putting on a defense.
Okay, you've got the white pocket square, but what's yellow? Just a caution?
It matches my tie.
Oh, okay. We're all about fashion today.
Courtroom fashion is really key to mine.
You know, Richard, you just threw out that you feel that Jose Baez has lost his credibility with everybody in the courtroom. But the fact is, this talk of violation of discovery rules, possible contempt of court, that happens when the jury is out of the courtroom. So has he lost his credibility with the jury, too?
The consequences of what happens outside the courtroom is being directly reflected with what's inside the courtroom. The fact that the jury sees a witness sitting on the witness stand and they come back and he's gone, or they have to go to sidebar and reiterate orders, or going back to the very beginning of the trial when he said, here's my case, here's what happened, and they're still waiting to hear that evidence after they've been methodically taken through the state's case. You can tell they're not prepared. Look, people were kind of being annoyed by the state's experts. Remember, they would hear the question and then look at that jury and say the answer. That's because these scientists, from the state's case, these scientists were prepared to be in a courtroom. When you look at a scientist, when you look at the three scientists that have been there, they're incredibly credentialed people. These are no lightweight scientists.
Yeah.
They're lightweight witnesses. And the reason they are is because when they've been brought into the courtroom, it makes perfect sense for Dr. Spitz to say, this autopsy didn't go the right way, and here's why. because he doesn't understand he's communicating to a jury.
Well, and here's the other thing, Amanda. This is why the state's case went pretty well, even though I think some of us are questionable about the premeditation. Each expert testified about something the next expert would bring back to focus about why it's so important, and it had a continuity that was very important. The defense, even these witnesses are coming in so haphazardly that the jury is not going to see whatever point is going to hopefully be made by Jose Baez, and that's the problem he has. And now it appears by the fact we're seeing lay witnesses waiting in the courtroom that Jose Baez is so concerned about presenting the witnesses in the manner he wanted to that he's being prepared to call witnesses out of order so he can at least keep the time filled. And once you've gotten that part, Jeff said it best earlier, this defense is really collapsing under its own weight.
Okay. Right before lunch, bit of a bombshell thrown out. The state brought up this former jail inmate, April Whalen. She apparently had a son who drowned back in 2007. I think we even have some video of that incident because we covered it as a news story. And her son was apparently rescued by the grandfather. He attempted CPR and called 911. So it sounds like the state is going to try to imply that maybe Casey got her story, her defense from this inmate. What do you guys think of this?
Well, me and Jeff were talking about earlier, we're not sure that the state can even get that in because they'd have to prove that Casey Anthony actually heard about this story. And even then, it's a question of how are they going to prove that she manipulated it to her own benefit. I think it's a real questionable issue. But the bigger point I heard Linda Drain Burdick say is, when Casey testifies, we have this evidence ready. They were basically double dog daring her to get on the stand and testify because they're spending every day going after every nuance that Jose Baez has raised, and they're just going to annihilate her on that stand with any possible thing she brings up. And that's the bigger story to me. When Linda Drain Burdick said, when Casey Anthony testifies, we're ready in rebuttal.
Well, and the judge also said today that they're going to be hearing evidence from the defense for another 2 weeks. He said that in reference to scheduling a Fry hearing. Does that give a hint that Casey's going to take the stand?
No.
No?
I can't even imagine that she is capable of taking the stand at this point. But let me temper that by saying if she wants to, she gets to, no matter what her lawyers think. So let me say this, though. Every single thing, every major point, drowning, molesting, manipulating the body, whatever those three key things are, not even almost, on the first day of this trial, Jose Baez gave his opening statement. The first witness was Casey's father. He was asked point blank, did you molest your daughter? And they didn't say a word about it. Richard's correct. They've put that out there in her face. They've dared her every time to present the defense they said they were going to present. They haven't done it. And I don't think they can.
Okay. Do you agree, Richard?
No, there's no way they can present it, because here's where a big mistake of Jose Baez. He thought that certain witnesses were going to testify in the state's case in chief. He thought Robin Adams was going to testify, and he thought that's how he was going to backdoor these molestations of George Anthony. He thought Roy Crunk was going to be called by the state, and that's how he was going to be able to bring up all this money that would supposedly make Roy Crunk morally bankrupt. He thought they were going to put on some expert to say how special this Henkel brand tape was. But right now, none of these people were presented by the state because they weren't really necessary to advancing their case. And now Jose Baez is left with, how does he get that same information in through his witnesses and through the evidence code as it applies to him? I don't think he can do it. I think he's just shot himself in the foot, and right now he's just trying to tread water because he's drowning. He's literally drowning.
Wow. Now, earlier today, we were reporting that a woman by the name of River Cruz, she also goes by the name of Crystal Holloway, was outside the courtroom. She is George Anthony's alleged mistress. Supposedly, they had some type of affair during the time that Kaylee was missing. Are we likely to see her in the stand anytime soon?
She's got a real problem with being relevant at this point.
And how is what she says that George told her not hearsay? Because remember, Baez never said, George, isn't it true you said this to River Cruz or Holloway or whatever her name is? He never asked that question. So right now, to call her to testify to what George said, it's all hearsay. I don't think Jose Baez really knows the evidence code. If there's any students at FAMU or Barry, if you want to come and help Jose out, you should.
Oh my goodness. Hey, and just to make it clear, the statement that you're talking about that this woman allegedly made, she told investigators that George Anthony told her in November of 2008 that Kaylee had died as a result of a terrible accident that snowballed. So that's what she's expected to share if and when the defense puts her on the stand. Did you think there's a credibility issue there?
First of all, George Anthony isn't the one on trial. So there are rules restricting whatever it is he's supposed to have said. He hasn't. I mean, there are rules of evidence that are going to restrict anything he's saying. The testimony is not at all relevant because they haven't put in any evidence that she drowned.
But let's say it gets in. Let's
that
say
there was an accident.
Let's say it does get in. What does that statement mean? My daughter's death was an accident. My granddaughter's death was an accident. Snowballed out of control. I think everybody at the time was thinking that Casey didn't know how to handle the situation when Kaylee died, and that it snowballed out of control for Casey. So it's open to interpretation that is not going to advance Jose Baez's theory. If anything, it might make the jury feel sorry for George.
I don't think it's admissible.
I agree with that. I do agree with that.
I don't see how they can get it in. There's no evidence that there's been an accident. There's no evidence of anything right now. Quite frankly, there's literally no evidence that's been presented by the defense of anything. So right now we just had witnesses that have said the weeds were this long, no they weren't, a dog buried the bones, no they didn't, there were bugs, there should have been bugs, no there aren't.
This defense is completely kerfuffled. That's the bottom line. The defense is completely kerfuffled.
All right,
and
now
that's
you
all
have
you
to
can say.
explain where you got that word from.
For those that weren't watching, Dr. Spitz used the word kerfuffle for the first time on American television. Kerfuffle basically means disarray or disorganized.
It's a great word.
And I think that sums up the Casey Anthony defense. They're kerfuffled.
All right, so the consensus this noon from both of you gentlemen is that the defense is in huge trouble. And you think...
I think it's done.
You think it's done?
There isn't a single thing that I can anticipate. I hate saying this, but there's not a single thing that I can anticipate. Usually you'd say, well, the defendant can take the stand, and no, she can't. She's a 6-time convicted felon. I promise you, if she takes the stand, that'll be a 3-day cross-examination. I don't see how she can answer every lie.
Because they'll go through all of the days Kaylee was missing.
Everything you heard them go through, that opening statement will be read to her. Did you say this? They'll play the tape again. I don't see in the world a witness out there that is short of George Anthony coming in there and going, it's all true, I did it, I molested my daughter, I hid the this isn't Perry Mason. There are no moments like that that await this defense. I don't see it.
If there's any hope for Casey Anthony, forget about the appeals. It's that the jury recognizes the ineffectiveness of her attorney, but they feel sorry for her situation. I'm not saying they will, but I think the juries tend to do that. They compensate for everything they see, and they try to bring the right verdict regardless of everything that went on in the courtroom. And I could see this jury doing that, coming back with a verdict that they think is right based upon what they can read between the lines. And that's, I think, her only hope. But, that's the issue.
Okay, I apologize. Our producer was speaking to us, telling us that we do have the live pictures that you're seeing of Casey Anthony back in the courtroom. So apparently they're getting close to the lunch break, wrapping up at 1:30. So I think at this point, gentlemen, I will thank you both so much for your analysis, insightful and entertaining. As always, love the pockets.
Throw it in, Jose. Throw it in.
All right, Richard Hornsby and Jeff Dean, thank you so much. And let's go back to the studio.
But Amanda, can they spell kerfuffle? That is the question. You'll have to check with them and let me know. We're taking a quick break. We'll come right back.